So if the Trump administration, if the Fed killed Charlie Kirk, look, there's no middle ground here right now. Either Erica Kirk is evil and was in on it, or Candace Owens is an evil cunt. I hope I'm being really clear about that.
Steven Crowder, what are you up to, bud? What are you doing? What are you doing? Really, what are you doing? Now, if you think that Candace has been off base, then you may agree with the underlying sentiment that Steven Crowder is putting forward. But I'm going to play you the clip that he's responding to, and I want you to tell me if you think it's a fair interpretation of what Candace Owens had to say.
My heart aches for the fact that he gave so much of his life to Trump and to politics, and they just were like, nope. That is it. It serves us or it doesn't serve us, and we want to move on. And so here's a holiday. Bro, if they try to give me a holiday, what is with them giving people a holiday after they kill them? Why is that a thing? You know what I mean? They're like, oh, Martin Luther King, what about this holiday? What about this boulevard? Anyways, let me knock it off. Like, they're going to give Charlie Kirk a boulevard. They already did. They did in Israel. They gave him freaking boulevard. It's like, as soon as they give you a boulevard and a holiday, they definitely killed you. Okay, there's no question. They killed you. There's no way. That's like their signature thing. It's like that's what they do. It's the Fed signature. It's how they sign off after they murder you. They're like holiday and a boulevard. And it's never on a nice side of town either. Like Charlie Kirk Boulevard is not going to be a nice side of town.
So what is Candace actually saying? She's saying that she thinks that Charlie Kirk was taken out by the Fed. But then she talks about how there is a boulevard named after Charlie Kirk that's in Israel. So maybe she's implying that, in fact, it was done in a joint operation or by a foreign intel agency, a federal government that just isn't American. I'm not sure exactly what she's saying, and she's not making it crystal clear. But what I'm pretty confident of is that she is not saying that Donald Trump is responsible. What I took away from it, and I think this is a much more fair reading or interpretation of what she has to say, is that she is disappointed in the Trump administration, as I share much of the disappointment, not just in the Trump administration, but in many of Charlie Kirk's inner circle, from Posobiec, who I read the Riot Act a couple weeks ago, to many other figures that were very close to Charlie, who seemed completely disinterested in actually digging into this story and making sure that they have the right guy. So just because she says that he's been betrayed does not mean that he has been betrayed in terms of the actual murder, but rather he may have been betrayed in the aftermath, as in people are not doing their jobs. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. Yeah, you guys. That's what she's saying. I mean, to me, it's crystal clear that's what she's saying. But that's not even the most far-fetched interpretation, which I don't think that, even though Crowder is making it seem as if it's a definitive statement that, in fact, Candace Owens believes that Donald Trump ordered a hit against Charlie Kirk.
Outrageous claims, and this is an outrageous claim, require outrageous evidence. Of course, as is par for the course, none has been presented. And I know that there might be a weaseling here saying, oh, well, I said the Fed, not the Trump administration. I said a boulevard in Israel. It's pretty clear, not clear. What she said was, they, the Fed, give you a boulevard when that's a sure sign that they have killed you. You know that they have killed you. He was betrayed in the worst way possible, giving so much of his life to the Trump presidency, to politics. The federal government, the Trump administration killed Charlie Kirk is the claim.
I don't believe that, and I doubt she does either. But he interprets this even more absurdly by dragging Charlie's wife, Erica Kirk, into this.
Now I'm going to tell you how I feel about it, what I think about it. Because you know who else would have to be involved? And this is the implication, of course, by design. And you can see the response with people out there saying, oh, well, then anyone who's close to, this is an inside job. You know who's really close to President Trump? And you know who people are now saying stood to gain? Well, Charlie's wife, Erica Kirk, who has now been put, Candace, with that language, with this accusation, has put the wife of Charlie Kirk, and she'll say, that's not what I tried to do. It is. It's the result. Erica Kirk in the crosshairs. So if the Trump administration, if the Fed killed Charlie Kirk, look, there's no middle ground here right now. Either Erica Kirk is evil and was in on it, or Candace Owens is an evil cunt. I hope I'm being really clear about that.
Oh, you're being really clear. You're just not making any fucking sense whatsoever. I mean, let's rewind a little bit, because I think in a 5-6 week period, especially with a news cycle that's been as fast as this one has, it's very easy to forget some of the order of operations, how things played out, and also things that have been said. I think a lot of people forget some of the track record with these people. So let's first start with the fact that Candace Owens herself said explicitly there are only 2 people on this planet that could get her to stop digging into her personal investigation to figuring out who killed her friend. And that is her family and Erica Kirk.
No one, and I mean absolutely no one, outside of my husband and Erica Kirk has the power to shut me up right now.
She didn't have to say that, but she made sure to put it out there. She's kind of putting it out there that Erica could tell me to be quiet. And guess what? I'm coming out with these episodes because she hasn't. And then you have to think about that. Why hasn't Erica ever said, be quiet? If Erica did even a tenth of what Candace has done, even said just a few sentences, they would lose all their donors. They could easily lose all their donors. All the big ones, they could just lose them. But if Erica stays silent and she just stays as graceful as she has, because that's all she's been doing, she's just been incredibly graceful.
So I want you to ask yourself, if Candace is trying to throw shade at Erica, if she's trying to basically say that she was involved in the murder of her own husband, would she be giving her the green light to get her to stop just by saying the word, please stop? That seems odd, doesn't it? That seems a little bit out of left field if Steven Crowder's interpretation is right. And the reason that it's out of left field is because it's fucking nuts. It's totally wrong. And I think with malice, it is wrong. And I'll tell you why I think that. Here's another tidbit of history in this 6-week insane cycle of news with this entire attack story, is that who was the very first person to break a big news story when it came to the assassination of Charlie Kirk? I bet you can't even remember. I'm sure some of you can, but I bet most of you can't remember. Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder, in the wee hours of, I think it was September 10th, no, of the 11th, the day after the attack on Charlie Kirk, he says, I got breaking news. He is the one who broke the story that the shell casings had been engraved with, pro-trans rhetoric, whatever that means. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that Steven Crowder, of all people, who is clearly, intentionally, with malice, smearing Candace Owens, who has been doggedly digging into this case, he was also privy to inside information from the sheriff's department in Utah in the early hours of the investigation. Isn't that an unbelievable coincidence? And it makes me wonder, and I'm just wondering, I don't know, but it makes me wonder sincerely if Steven Crowder is if he's not involved deeply on some level of intelligence agencies or something, or at least he has sources that are feeding him information, and maybe this is his payback. Hey, you remember when we gave you that hot story that went crazy viral and brought you back into, the mainstream relevance for a couple weeks? Well, Candace Owens has given us a lot of problems, and we're going to need you to take her down a peg. Could you do that? Sure. All right. Thanks. It'll go viral too, by the way, because as much as people are supporting Candace, equal amount are demonizing her. So it's not a hard sell, right? Look, this is my honest opinion. I don't know how you hear what Candace said. Like, you can hear what Candace says there and completely disagree. Of course. I'm not even sure I agree. I think that there's certainly not everybody who gets a street named after them was murdered by the federal government. Okay. Not everybody. And she's saying, like, that's a sure sign. That's not a sure sign. I grew up in San Diego. There was Ted Williams Parkway. Ted Williams, baseball great. Not murdered by the government. I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident about that one. So this is not a uniform statement, and I think she's being hyperbolic, but it is also true, in my opinion, that Martin Luther King Jr. was. And he's got a whole lot of streets. And yeah, they are on the rough side of the tracks almost all the time. And I think it's fair to wonder if perhaps Charlie Kirk was taken out by the federal government for his shift on opinion when it comes to our greatest ally.
Many times, the whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still have the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier. Right, the whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it.
It's a fair question to ask. It doesn't mean it's true. It means it's a legitimate question to ask, of course. And anybody trying to stop you from asking that question is not your ally. I promise you. They are interested in firewalling you from genuine inquiry into the nation who is responsible, and famously so, for the most political assassinations of any nation on the planet over the past 100 years. 75, whatever. Okay? It's totally fair for you to ask that. Maybe it's not fair to say definitively I know because you don't have proof. I'll be the first to critique. Ian Carroll, buddy of mine, I critiqued him. Don't say it definitively if you don't have proof. That doesn't help. But anybody telling you you can't even consider it, that's even worse. That's like definitely someone who's interested in painting a picture, crafting a narrative, keeping you from actual genuine inquiry into what matters tremendously, which is who actually did this and why, which we still don't know definitively. And that's why I've come to the defense time and time again of Candace Owens, even though I think that she has been sloppy at times. I think she has been reckless at times when it comes to how she has covered this story, from talking about bee cults and all sorts. I mean, she's just throwing shit at the wall sometimes. But she has also brought to the fore more valid information than just about anybody. And that's why I defend her, because you can take the good with the bad. And that's it's a shotgun blast of information, and you have to sort it out yourself. So I just want to be very clear. I have appreciated her efforts, despite the fact that I think she has gotten out over her skis a few times and probably put undue cause for concern on other people that were within Charlie's inner circle that probably don't deserve it. I mean, almost certainly. Some of them probably do, though. And that's where the good with the bad comes, right? Here's a good example of this. I want to be very clear. I'm making no allegations against this guy whatsoever. But this is yet another example of someone in Charlie's inner circle behaving very strangely in the aftermath of this attack. His name is Mikey McCoy, and he is the chief of staff for Charlie Kirk under TPUSA. And he has this very odd reaction after the shooting.
Gang violence. Great.
And I've scrolled his Instagram, and it seems like they were definitely friends. Charlie was at his wedding, and it's very unusual behavior. Just putting myself in his shoes, if I see my friend get shot, I'm almost either I'm running or I'm running towards him to try and get him to the ground faster because I'm trying to save my friend's life. He does neither. He picks up his phone. It looks like he's putting his phone to his head, and then he immediately and casually walks away. It's unusual. But the reason I'm saying very clearly that I'm not making any allegations against him is that people do really weird shit in times of crisis. That's just the truth. A lot of people freeze. A lot of people run. A lot of people just do odd stuff. You had that one guy jumps up and like throws his hands and starts a USA chant. Maybe he's an op. Maybe he's a lunatic. People do weird shit. And when you got 3,000 people there for an event that is an obvious, like crazy crisis moment, you're going to have some weird shit that is not, in fact, indicative of involvement in the murder of Charlie Kirk. So I think it's really important that when people see weird stuff like that, it's fair to ask questions, absolutely. But please be careful about making allegations against people that were close to Charlie, that behaved weirdly, I'll admit, but you don't know why. Maybe he got on his phone right away because he realized that there was an attack and he was calling, I don't know, the authorities, a hospital, something. Like, these are all things that could be proven out, though. And if you had a functioning FBI, a functioning investigatory body, be it local or federal, then they would give you those answers. And hopefully they're digging. So that's the reason that I mention it, is like, it's not to say that it's nothing, but it's also to be very clear that it doesn't mean that it's everything. We don't know what it is. It's very strange, but it could be nothing. So just be careful, especially when you're dealing with people who, if they are innocent, as I said a week or two ago with Charlie's wife, be very careful about making accusations against, if she is innocent, you're attacking a wife and a mother who is mourning the loss of her husband in one of the most graphic public political assassinations, I mean, the most in my lifetime. But getting back to Crowder, what are you doing, Steven Crowder? I'm sincerely asking you, what are you intending to do? What are you attempting to do? Because this seems like such an intentional smear job against Candace Owens, claiming that she is in fact alleging that Charlie's wife was involved with the murder of her own husband, when in fact, Candace Owens has not said that. And to a large extent, she's basically said the opposite, that she will stop if Erica Kirk tells her to. And I might also add that Candace Owens and Erica Kirk started following each other after the attack. They did not follow each other prior to the attack. And I think that's interesting. It doesn't mean everything, but it could be something for sure. That perhaps Erica enjoys that Candace is doing this. She appreciates it. Perhaps she's feeding her information. That's something that people ought to be asking themselves. If Candace Owens is tarnishing Charlie's legacy and jeopardizing his organization and all this stuff, which is what a lot of the detractors of Candace Owens are saying, then Erica Kirk, who's now basically taking over at the helm of TPUSA, who has a green light from Candace Owens, who said in public, if you tell me to shut up, I will, hasn't done so. Why? Is it hurting her brand? Is it hurting the case, the investigation into the murder of her husband? Doesn't seem like she feels that way. So what are you doing, Steven Crowder? What exactly are you doing, buddy? And I'll just say in conclusion, I'm not sure. But it strikes me as op-like behavior. It does. And it makes me wonder how you got those leads about the shell casings in the wee hours of the next day. How'd you do that? And why are you intentionally taking her out of context? Not even out of context. You're playing the clip and then just lying about what she said. Weird behavior. But he's not the only one. We've got Seth Dillon going on with Dana Loesch.
Do you think that some of this is maybe the consequence of, it's great to have a coalition or a big tent, but there's certain things that are just persona non grata in a coalition, and using identity politics like the left ought to be one of them. Is some of this a failure to enforce that?
Oh, certainly. I just wrote about this in the Free Press, by the way, talking about the foolishness of the no enemies to the right principle. I think it's not just foolish, it's immoral. To not draw lines, to not be willing to say, there are certain people that you won't lock arms with. A lot of these things, these are things that the right, there was a lot more moral clarity on the right several years ago, where the alt-right, or, this white supremacist kind of like equal but opposite reaction to like the leftist Antifa thugs, like everybody kind of saw that as being this really fringe, really nasty thing that we didn't want any part of. And we distinguished between ourselves and them. We're like, they keep calling Trump, and his supporters Nazis and Hitler and whatever. Like, we're not like that. There may be people like that on the fringe far right, but we're not like them. We would distinguish between, now there are calls to join with them and to bring them into the movement. They're just filled with bigotry and hatred. They have authoritarian impulses. they're collectivists. Like, you add all of these things up, and it's like, how could we possibly benefit from having them in the conservative movement? That doesn't make any sense. You know, this is a real reckoning for conservatives to decide, what is our identity? What is a conservative? That's the next question that we need to be asking. We had that question about what is a woman. Now we need to have it about what is a conservative.
Well, we agree on one thing. We should be asking what a conservative is. And I also agree that I'm not very fond of collectivists or identitarians, which makes me ask the obvious next question, which is, why is it that you're so permissive? Why are you so accepting? Why are you so willing to excommunicate anybody who's not willing to accept the obvious collective identitarian worldview of Zionists? Why is that the one exception that should be allowed for on the right? But Nick Fuentes has to be excommunicated. Isn't that interesting? So my argument would be, if you want to get rid of the white nationalists, well, then you ought to be getting rid of the Jewish nationalists too on the right wing. That should not be permissible either. But it is. There's an exception being made. Isn't that interesting? Which draws into question your credibility, your entire worldview, for that matter. You seem to be a fraud, and I'm calling you that. I think that's my opinion. You are being a fraudulent actor. You're trying to gatekeep a right-wing movement, which you have no right to do. You have no right to do so, because you're not even maintaining your own worldview in the prescription or description of what's transpiring right now. And moreover, you are tarnishing, in fact, Charlie Kirk's legacy, because this was the main fight that he was in the final months of his life, which was to try and keep a big tent, to allow for Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, et cetera, Dave Smith, to continue to attend TPUSA events and to kind of open up the dialogue when it came to American-Israeli relations. That was what Charlie wanted. That is what he said in the final 48 hours of his life, that he had no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause because he was hemorrhaging donors to that end. So, yeah, when you so casually and flippantly try and destroy Candace Owens, you're really doing what you're accusing her of, which is classic projection and gaslighting. And I don't appreciate it. I don't. And I think that Charlie wouldn't appreciate it either. I think that he would definitely see what I'm saying here, that you are the one making the exception for identitarianism and collectivism. You're the one doing that while accusing others of doing the same, just because we refuse to go along with it. Isn't that interesting? But Seth Dillon isn't the only one who's been trying to make his name on the back of this crisis. Josh Hammer, who I have already demolished for being an overt liar during an active murder investigation, had this to say a couple days ago.
So the fact that we're even having this big debate over Charlie's legacy on Israel and Jews is pretty disturbing in and of itself. But the reason that Candace, I think, ultimately decided to go down this hyper-conspiratorial, evil and demonic and twisted path when it comes to me in particular is that it complicates her narrative and their narrative. It complicates their narrative because they can't stand the fact that a kippah, yarmulke-wearing Jew who wrote a book about Israel and the Jews and Western civilization, they can't stand the fact that someone like that, someone like me, was actually in Charlie's inner circle. It deeply muddies, it deeply complicates their narrative, and therefore the narrative can't exist and has to be eradicated.
Let me be crystal clear with you, Josh Hammer. I couldn't give a fuck less about your religion. I don't like you because you lied about a guy who you claim was your friend, who you were in the inner circle with. You lied about his mindset during an active murder investigation. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes you opens you up for inquiry from the officials that are trying to figure out motives for why Charlie Kirk was killed. And if they're not fucking talking to you, that's a tragedy. It's a travesty of justice, actually. So I hope that they are. But just this constant, woe is me, I'm such a victim, right? You lied about the group messages or the group chat that you were in and the nature of those communications that you were having with Charlie Kirk 48 hours before he was murdered in front of the world. And you're saying, oh, Candace Owens is attacking you because of your religion. Really? That's the reason that we're upset with you, huh? Not because you lied during an active murder investigation about her friend. No, because of your religion. If you can't see it for the shield that it's being used as, I don't know what to tell you. I've never seen a more brazen and blatant example of using the anti-Semitism shield for bad behavior that I've ever seen. It's just so obvious and reprehensible. So yeah, Josh Hammer, Seth Dillon, and Steven Crowder, I don't think that you're honest actors. And I don't understand necessarily the nature of the game that you're playing, but it isn't a truthful one. And I'm going to continue to track in terms of following what you have to say, because I have to. I have to figure out what's going on with this narrative battle. Why exactly are you doing what you're doing? Why are you overtly lying time and time again about people who seem to be genuinely interested in the truth of who killed Charlie Kirk? Why are you doing that? I'll leave that up to the audience to decide. You guys tell me. Why are they doing that? Paid operatives? Just trying to capitalize on the time of crisis to make their names a little bit bigger, or something worse? Don't know. I being totally honest, I don't know. But these are not honest people. Speaking of dishonest people, let's tie into yesterday's show and get a little update on the West Bank acquisition from the Israelis. Obviously, J.D. Vance said that was not going to happen, and Trump said the same. This is what Bibi has to say.
נשיא טראמפ אמר מוקדם יותר בראיון לטיים, ישראל לא תספח את הגדה המערבית, כי אני נתתי את מילתי למדינות ערב. הוא אמר לי, אם נעשה את זה, נאבד את התמיכה האמריקאית. האם האמריקאים מכתיבים עכשיו מדיניות לישראל? מה תגובתך?
זה הרי תמיד תגידו, זה לא משנה.
לא, אני שואלת אותך.
אני מאוד מאוד מעריך את התמיכה של הנשיא טראמפ, גם במהלכי המלחמה, גם בהחלטה שלי להיכנס לעיר עזה, גם בגיוס שלו את ישראל. אנחנו מדינה עצמאית.
Now, he's not speaking English, so I'll translate. He's basically saying, we're an independent nation. They don't get to dictate what we're going to do, despite the fact that we exist at their mercy, from financial to military support. We're going to do what we want when it comes to the West Bank. If you got a problem with it, you can kick rocks. Well, here's what J.D. Vance had to say.
West Bank, sorry,
yeah, go ahead. We'll do, yeah.
The West Bank vote yesterday that took place while you were in the country.
Oh, yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I was sort of confused by that. Now, I actually asked somebody about it, and they told me that it was a symbolic vote, some symbolic vote to recognize or a symbolic vote to annex the West Bank. I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it. Thank you.
I was personally insulted. Well, that's good to hear, JD. And I hope you're sincere with that. For those that aren't familiar, the way Palestine is laid out is that it is essentially separated into two. You have Gaza, and then you have the West Bank. And Gaza has been destroyed because that's where Hamas attacked from. But the West Bank has been slowly being taken over by settlers, but it is a more peaceful region of Palestine, if there is one. And there was a vote right after Donald Trump said this.
Did you promise leaders this week that you would not allow Israel to annex the West Bank? Is that something that you
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this directly?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it. Whether I spoke to him or not, I did. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now, okay? Yes.
Now, that's about as crystal clear as Donald Trump ever gets, especially when it comes to the topic of Israel, saying, not going to happen. Flatly not going to happen. Then the next day after that, they have some allegedly ceremonial vote where they're voting on annexing of the West Bank. And yeah, it passed. I think it was in the Knesset. So that's why J.D. Vance responded the way he did. And the whole reason I wanted to bring all this up is that this is the divide on the right wing. And this is like, are we an independent nation or not? Who is in the driver's seat? Who's the dog? Who's the tail? Who's wagging who? We're about to find out. If after all of the aid and support, military support, everything else, munitions, that has been provided to Israel in their war, and especially after Donald Trump is being very clear. He's not saying it overtly, but I'll tell you what he's saying. I'll translate. What he's saying is, I told the Arab nations when it came to negotiations with Hamas to get the ceasefire, to get those hostages out, that the West Bank will not be annexed. That's obviously what he's saying. He's like, I told the Arab leaders the West Bank will not be annexed. Well, why was he talking to the Arab leaders? Well, because they were trying to negotiate a ceasefire and a release of those hostages. So he's saying that was a chip. That was a promise that I made to the Arab leaders to get them to get Hamas to back down. And if you take the West Bank in the aftermath of this, then I look like a lying asshole. And I look like I'm totally not in control. And I'm the leader of America and allegedly the leader of the free world. And that can't happen. And then Netanyahu goes, we're an independent nation. We'll do what we want. So we're about to find out who's an independent nation. There can only be one, as Highlander. It's Highlander mode right now. Oh, gosh. What a crazy world. All right. I'm going to get out of here. If you enjoyed this episode, please do hit a like button, subscribe, leave a comment, and most importantly, share it around. Pick up your mom, grandma, niece's phone, go search in their podcast, podcatcher app and search Liberty Lockdown, 2 words, and subscribe, and then hit auto update and just red pill the shit out of your Gigi, because that's hilarious. And as always, if you want to get cozy, go to mypillow.com, use promo code LOCKDOWN, and pick you up some Mike Lindell styled coziness. mypillow.com, promo code LOCKDOWN. Love you guys. Bye.
Subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. Great podcast. Clint is tight.